Because I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth. Job 19, verse 25. The story of Job, marked by pain and loss, is also one of the deepest lessons about faith, resilience, and divine purpose amidst suffering. When everything seemed lost, wealth, family, health, Job faced the greatest trial any human could endure. He didn't know why he was suffering so much, but even in tears and desolation, he didn't give up seeking answers and maintaining his integrity. What he discovered at the end of this journey was far more valuable than all he had lost. Imagine losing everything at once: your job, your loved ones, and even your health. Now, think about the strength it would take to keep believing that there is a greater purpose behind it all. This is Job's testimony. His story is not just about suffering, but about discovering, at rock bottom, a faith that cannot be broken, even in the face of the worst storms. Have you ever wondered how someone can face the unimaginable and still find hope? Job's life teaches us that when the world falls apart around us, what remains is our relationship with the Creator. Even when we don't understand the why, Job's story shows that there is always a for what, a hidden purpose that is only revealed to those who persevere to the end. This is the story of a man who lost everything, but found something even more valuable: a deep understanding of who God is and how great His plan can be. Now, the question is, are you ready to discover what Job's journey can teach you about your own life? Because this isn't just Job's story, it could very well be yours too. Job was a man whose life reflected extraordinary prosperity. The Bible describes him as the greatest man among all the people of the East. Job 1 verse 3. He owned a large amount of livestock: 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, along with many servants. But Job's greatness wasn't only in his material possessions. His true wealth lay in his character. Job 1 verse 1 says he was blameless and upright, feared God, and shunned evil. These qualities placed him in a place of honor before both God and men. His life was an example of devotion. Job had the constant practice of interceding for his children, offering sacrifices to God on their behalf. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Job 1 verse 5. He understood that even amidst abundance, it was necessary to maintain spiritual vigilance. This paternal care demonstrated his concern not only for his family's material well-being, but also for their standing before God. Job's wealth didn't distance him from his faith. On the contrary, he recognized that everything he had came from God's hands. In Job 1 verse 10, even Satan acknowledges God's protection over Job's life. Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. Job understood that more important than his possessions was his relationship with the Creator. He was a man of prayer and sacrifice, always seeking God's approval in everything he did. Despite all his wealth and influence, Job remained humble and God-fearing. He knew that prosperity could be a blessing, but also a trap. Therefore, his greatest concern was keeping his heart focused on God. In a time when wealth was seen as a sign of divine favor, Job never allowed it to become an excuse for pride. Instead, he lived with gratitude and reverence. always seeking God's will in every area of his life. Even with all the stability he had, Job could never have predicted the test that was to come. His life was a testimony that it's possible to prosper materially and spiritually at the same time. However, Job's story shows us that no matter how secure we are in our faith, there is always a greater plan that we often cannot see. The scene was about to change, and Job would be tested in ways he could never have imagined. As Job lived his life of faith and prosperity, a scene was unfolding in heaven. The angels presented themselves before God, and Satan was also among them. Confident in Job, God asked Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." Job 1 verse 8. Satan, ever the provocateur, replied that Job's devotion was merely a result of his blessings. He suggested that if everything was taken from Job, he would surely curse God. The enemy didn't believe in Job's genuine faith. For him, it was easy to be faithful when life was full of prosperity. But God, knowing Job's heart, allowed Satan to test him. "Very well, then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Job 1 verse 12, said God. With this permission, Satan left the Lord's presence, determined to prove his point. Thus began one of the most challenging moments in Job's life, where his possessions, family, and stability would be devastated. The test was not mild. In a short span of time, Job received a series of devastating news. His servants were killed, his property destroyed, and worst of all his children died in a single tragic accident. Job 1 verses 13 to 19. Each loss seemed more unbearable than the last. Satan believed that by taking away everything Job loved and valued, he would abandon his faith and curse God. But Job, even amidst unimaginable pain, took an action that few could. He bowed down and worshipped. "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord is taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." Job 1 verse 21. This moment reveals the depth of Job's faith. Instead of cursing God, he acknowledged that everything he had, from the very beginning, belonged to the Creator. His heart, though devastated, didn't turn against God. His response surprised even the enemy, for despite all the suffering, in all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Job 1 verse 22. God's confidence in his servant was being justified in Satan's eyes, but the trial wasn't over yet. Even with all the devastation, Satan wasn't satisfied. He believed that by afflicting Job's health, he would finally break him. Permission for a new test would be given, and Job would face another wave of suffering, even more intense. But that will be addressed in the next chapter of this story. Job's suffering, which already seemed unbearable, was about to intensify. After losing all his possessions and children, Satan received permission from God to also afflict Job's health. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Job 2 verse 7. The sores covered Job's body, causing constant pain and deep discomfort. In his agony, he sat among the ashes and used a broken piece of pottery to scrape his sores, trying to relieve his torment. The physical suffering now compounded the emotional pain of his losses. Even in the face of such calamity, Job did not sin against God. However, his wife, seeing his condition, bitterly provoked him. "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." Job 2 verse 9. For her, the situation seemed unbearable and pointless. But Job, with remarkable composure, replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Job 2 verse 10. This response demonstrated Job's profound understanding of God's sovereignty, even in circumstances he could not comprehend. Job's condition worsened as days passed, and his misery seemed unending. Those who once revered him now despised him. His body was covered in sores, his reputation had crumbled, and he was completely alone in his suffering. His laments reflected his agony. "May the day of my birth perish." Job 3 verse 1. Job wasn't just questioning his pain, but the very reason for his existence, wishing he had never been born. Despite all his affliction, Job did not lose his faith. He expressed his pain in words, but did not accuse God of injustice. This is significant because it shows that even in the greatest adversities, Job's faith remained intact, even though he did not understand the reasons. Suffering is difficult to reconcile with faith, but Job demonstrated that it's possible to endure the worst trials without losing sight of the truth about God's character. He didn't understand the why, but he knew who God was, and that sustained him. At that moment of extreme pain, Job was surrounded by questions, but had no answers. His journey of suffering was far from over, and he would soon face another challenge: the visit of his friends, who would try to explain the inexplicable. Their questions and accusations would only add to the tension. Doubt would begin to creep in, and the challenge to maintain faith would become even greater. Job's pain was deep, and his laments reflected a shattered heart. He felt abandoned, lost in his suffering. In his lament, Job expressed the wish that he had never been born, as this would have spared him such suffering. "Why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb?" Job 3 verse 11. He was emotionally exhausted, and his pain spilled out in desperate words. Yet, despite all this anguish, Job did not curse God. He questioned the meaning of his pain, but never lost his respect and reverence for the Creator. Job's condition attracted the visit of three friends: Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. When they heard about the disaster that had befallen him, they came from their homes to comfort him. However, when they saw the extent of Job's condition, they were shocked. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud. Job 2 verse 12. The sorrow was so great that they tore their clothes, sprinkled dust on their heads, and sat with Job for 7 days and 7 nights without saying a word. It was a scene of utter desolation. They wanted to comfort him, but didn't know how. After these 7 days of silence, the true intentions of his friends began to reveal themselves. Eliphaz was the first to speak, suggesting that Job's suffering was the result of some hidden sin. Consider now, who, being innocent, has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? Job 4 verse 7, said Eliphaz. To him and his companions, the logic was simple. Job was being punished for something he had done wrong. Bildad and Zophar followed the same reasoning, insisting that suffering was a form of divine correction, and that if Job confessed his sins, God would restore him. Job, in his anguish, rejected these accusations. He knew he had done nothing to deserve such suffering. Relent, Do not be unjust. Reconsider, for my integrity is at stake. Job 6 verse 29, he affirmed. The misunderstanding of his friends only added to his torment. Instead of receiving comfort, Job faced judgment. They believed that God's justice was immediate and retributive. Those who suffer do so because they deserve it. But Job knew his situation was more complex, something his friends couldn't understand. The silence, which had once seemed supportive, was now filled with words of accusation. These dialogues between Job and his friends reveal a common tension even today. How do we reconcile suffering with God's goodness? His friends tried to find easy answers, but Job wasn't satisfied with these simplistic explanations. He knew his pain couldn't be reduced to punishment for sin. This conviction led him to seek answers directly from God, paving the way for the final confrontation between Job and the Creator. After long speeches from his friends and God's silence, Job finally expressed what was in his heart. He felt misunderstood by men, and even more so by the apparent absence of God amidst his suffering. Job longed for a direct audience with the Creator to present his pain and seek answers. If only I knew where to find him. If only I could go to his dwelling. Job 23 verse 3. He wasn't challenging God out of pride, but yearning to understand the purpose of such suffering. His cry was a sincere search for justice and meaning amidst the chaos. Then, God finally responded to Job, not gently, but in a whirlwind. The Lord began questioning Job, not about his integrity, but about his understanding of the universe and divine sovereignty. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Job 38 verse 4. God didn't give Job the direct answers he had hoped for. Instead, the Lord revealed his greatness and the vast control he had over all creation. The intention wasn't to humiliate Job, but to show that human understanding is limited when faced with the complexity of God's plans. Faced with this revelation, Job realized that his questions, while valid, were insignificant in comparison to God's majesty. He responded with humility, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes." Job 42 verses 5 to 6. Job wasn't repenting for hidden sins, but for the presumption that he could fully understand God's ways. It was a moment of deep reconciliation, where Job, though still without answers for his pain, accepted divine sovereignty with a submissive heart. After this transformative encounter, God not only restored Job's health, but also gave him back everything he had lost, doubling his possessions. The Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. Job 42 verse 10. Besides material riches, God gave Job new children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. And the Bible records that nowhere in all the land were there found women as beautiful as Job's daughters. Job 42 verse 15. His life was completely restored, and he lived another 140 years, seeing his descendants to the 4th generation. Job 42 verse 16. The story of Job ends with a powerful lesson. Even in the greatest pain and doubt, faith and trust in God's sovereignty are the foundation for true restoration. Job didn't receive the explanations he sought, but he found something even greater, a deeper understanding of who God is. His faith, tested to the extreme, emerged stronger, and his life, once marked by suffering, ended in peace and abundance. His story continues to inspire those who face trials, reminding us that even when we don't understand the present, God always has a greater plan. Job's story challenges us to rethink how we deal with suffering and faith. When life takes away what we love most, when answers seem distant and God's silence is deafening, what remains? Job shows us that even in the deepest pain, there is an unbreakable hope for those who trust in God's purpose. His story is a reminder that even when we don't understand the paths we are walking, God is writing something greater. And if you were in Job's place, how would you react in the face of such devastating losses? Would your faith withstand such a challenge? Maybe you've already faced difficult moments and didn't understand why. But the real question is, are you ready to trust in the for what that God may be revealing in your life? Just like Job, there may be restoration waiting, a new phase filled with purpose and hope. So, what lesson can you take from Job's journey? What can you change in your life today to strengthen your faith, even when answers don't come immediately? Reflect on this and remember, faithfulness amidst suffering is a powerful testimony that God can use to transform not only your life, but also the lives of those around you. If this content touched you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. That way, you can continue to follow transformative stories like Job's and learn more about what the Bible has to say for your everyday life.